I want to talk about today what I've come to refer to as the great gaslighting. It's a special form of gaslighting, but before I proceed, let me just say I don't mean the sort of new conventional meaning of gaslighting, which simply means insulting somebody or calling them stupid. No, I mean the traditional sense of gaslighting in which somebody tries to make you question your sanity in some sense because you thought something was a certain way and they claim it isn't. How does this manifest itself? Well, broadly speaking, you have a number of people, ever since the emergence of social media, and I'd say more recently, in the last 5 years or so, when social media has reigned supreme, you have this situation, basically, where you have a lot of individuals who are, shall we say, fortunate in life. They have a lot of wealth, they look really good, or they have some other distinguishing feature which is usually coveted or at the very least adds a benefit to their life, an immense one in some cases. And then they'll come around and say something to the effect of, actually, Joe, money isn't that important. It doesn't really matter. I've learned this harsh lesson in my life. I spent all my life accumulating money only to realize how little it matters. Or you'll get a lot of attractive people, it's very common amongst women, in fact, who complain about the attention. Now, on the one hand, I get it, because if you're an attractive woman, you don't want attention from all men. You want attention from a very specific subset of men. But these women, of course, will mostly gaslight other women and say, well, you might think it's really nice to be good looking, but the nonstop attention you get is horrible, and I wish I could just be left in peace. And you also see this with chads. You see this actually with models claiming that, well, in fact, it's not the looks that matter when it comes to interpersonal relations. It's really your personality, which is a very, very common trope, to be fair, but you'll actually hear this occasionally. In fact, none other as Sean O'Pry, a very famous male model. At some point in time, he was the highest paid male model, said just such a thing. And I've even seen it with very tall men who claim that it's mostly disadvantageous because of their joint problems, which is true. They tend to have more joint problems than shorter men. But of course, in such a case, they're not taking into account all the social benefits that they receive. Now, to be perfectly fair and honest, I think one version of this is actually, in effect, gaslighting, an active attempt to make you question your sanity, make you question what you've come to know, your own reality, as it were. And there's another version of this, which I would argue is less malicious, but still achieves the same effect at the end of the day, though based on intention, it's probably a little bit more harmless, depending on your interpretation. And that's a kind of unintentional gaslighting. Years back, and you might remember this gentleman, I went to university with him decades ago. His name was Jules. He was a tall French Chad. Pretty nice guy, personable, but mostly he was about his looks. And occasionally, because he got a lot of attention from women, he would complain about the situations he landed in, the situations that would aggravate him, and so on and so forth. All with respect to women. Now, of course, there were a bunch of guys in his circle of friends. I was more of an acquaintance than anything else. They were basically average looking, average height, average everything. And as one could well imagine, they were not getting the same degree of attention from women. In fact, if recollection serves, a lot of these guys were starving, and some of them, in fact, were virgins, and we're talking about early mid-20s here. But Jules periodically would complain about his situation, his girlfriend, or when he broke up, the many women pursuing him or chasing him, and how much of a headache it was, and how he just wanted to be left alone. Now, it begs the question, did he really want to be left alone? I'm sure he enjoyed the attention. He probably either didn't want to admit that, or he wasn't aware of that on a subconscious level. In the case of Jules, or similar situations, where people are not actively trying to gaslight you, vis-a-vis, say, the internet, on a podcast, or some kind of pundit online trying to convince you of something, a lot of this just comes down to the problem of self-extrapolation. People, generally speaking, only understand their own experiences and are almost always self-referential in how they view the world and how they interact with the world, and consequently how they interact with other people. And thinking back on it, I don't think Jules was ever particularly malicious. He really found it, on occasion, annoying to be plagued by all these women that were chasing him. A lot of them were crazy and annoying. But of course, he never really took the time to realize that his friends, who were average looking and average height, had a different set of problems. And this is a kind of universal, right? If you've never had an alcohol problem, it might be really difficult for you as an individual to imagine what that's like. You can intellectualize it and try to analogize it to some other form of addiction or compulsion that you might have. But at the end of the day, you're probably not an alcoholic. You can't really relate. Similarly, if you're somebody with very little appetite that doesn't enjoy eating, it's going to be really difficult to wrap your head around how somebody becomes morbidly obese because you, frankly speaking, find eating and food a pain in the ass and you do it because it's absolutely necessary. So there are countless variations of this at the end of the day. But even if it's not malicious, even if it is done simply because of ignorance or an inability to extrapolate beyond one's own perspective and experience, the point is still driven home. The most prominent one I've noticed is the money one, followed by the looks, but there are others. You get really wealthy people, and I'll set aside that a lot of them, quote unquote, worked hard for their wealth. That's irrelevant. The point is that they're telling people en masse that money doesn't actually matter, and that if you have money problems, they don't matter either because money doesn't matter. It's very easy to say these things when you're loaded with cash, which is painfully obvious. Now, sometimes, in some metaphorical sense, they might mean it in the sense of, well, money can't buy you happiness. That's not entirely true. There have been studies showing that money does add to your overall contentment and life satisfaction. They say money can't buy you health. Well, that's also not true because with the right money, you can buy high-quality food, you can afford all sorts of exercise equipment, and the best doctors and best treatment. So this is probably the biggest meme and the greatest form of gaslighting. One reason they might do it, and I'm speculating, is they don't want people to resent them, of course. And the rich are generally resented. A lot of people say the resentment is born of envy, and to some degree that's true, but it's more to do with the fact that wealthy people typically don't display any concern for people outside of their own ranks. And so that disregard for people of other socioeconomic brackets is what, in my experience, really annoys people and really pisses them off at the end of the day. But a lot of times, just stupid platitudes, and it's very difficult to take seriously. Now, the left might use the term privilege, and that's certainly a word. I don't like how often it's used and how abused it is, but it certainly is true, especially if you're a good-looking person that was just given the right genes to look good, such as Sean O'Pry. For you to then condescend to somebody and say, look, looks at the end of the day don't matter that much. It's really down to your personality and your kindness and how you are as a person, which is partly true, assuming you pass the looks test, assuming you have the good looks. So women do like nice and kind men, assuming they find them quite attractive. These are all secondary things that come after you pass the looks test. And the problem with this gaslighting is that your reality is your reality, and it is true. If you are not the beneficiary of, say, huge sums of money, or you don't look particularly good, your life will be harder. And then these people come along and say, well, it's actually not that hard. You might be a sub 5, or you might struggle to pay the bills, but that's not really an issue. You need to focus on what counts, which is always some weird abstraction such as personality or love, or whatever other poppycock they might come up with in a given moment. None of this would be as insidious as it is if you didn't have hordes of so-called normies adopting this wisdom and just buying into it wholesale and repeating the same pablum and memes to you nonstop. You see a lot of people on YouTube who are neither particularly good-looking nor particularly wealthy repeat the exact same crap. Indeed, the Honorable Lord of Black Pills, Rehab Room, recently did a video where he got some normie guy who had a full head of hair, shaved his head, who then claimed that it made no difference whatsoever, somehow trying to analogize him shaving his head with somebody who has premature balding in his early 20s or even his late teens, i.e. somebody who's not even familiar with the Norwood Reaper, pretending that the Norwood Reaper doesn't matter, especially as a very young man. And here you have a normie guy, both in terms of looks and his attitude, pretending the exact same things that a Sean O'Pry might pretend, or Chad Williamson, or very wealthy people who are gaslighting you, telling you, well, look, you shouldn't worry about money because it doesn't matter. I might have $50 million, but I'm telling you, at the end of the day, I don't feel any better for it. Just like a guy with a full head of hair in his early 20s, shaving his head is not the equivalent of having a Norwood 5 at age 21, 20, or age 19. So this gaslighting is definitely an insidious trend, and it's important to pay attention to, because your reality as an average person is probably noticeably harder than what these people are claiming, and you shouldn't let them convince you otherwise. Now, I'm not claiming, like a lot of people claim about me, that I'm saying that you should wallow in mud and dirt and do nothing and just rot away, but if you don't have certain advantages in life, it's just a fact that some things are going to be harder. And there's no point in pretending about that. And all this social media and all these gurus are not helping. And what's even worse are the regular normie people who are repeating this nonsense ad nauseum, claiming that it's correct. Don't listen to them. Reality says otherwise. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons. You guys are the best. You support the channel, and I am everlastingly grateful for that. And special thanks to my donors on PayPal as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, it'd be much appreciated. Until the next time, may the gods watch over you. If I'm still alive, I'll check you out then. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.